When it comes to data privacy, we always talk about EU GDPR and EU being the hub of what happens in context of privacy. And same spirit, if you want to talk about innovation, we want to say Silicon Valley or California. That's where the real action is. So big tech is there. And then if you see the trend in last few years, California has been at the forefront of privacy legislation, the CCPA, the CPRA, and now the Delete Act. And in that context, there is a philosophy, can we contain the big tech? And whether we can contain the big tech, whether we can protect our civil rights, economy, and democracy in this digital world, that's going to be an unending debate. But there, I had the privilege of meeting Tom Kemp, who's the Silicon Valley based author, entrepreneur, and angel investor, and also a privacy advisor who's going to write a book on containing big tech. So let's go and talk to him about how to contain big tech and what is Silicon Valley doing in the context of privacy. And we'll also talk about the Delete Act.
Hello, and welcome to the Fit for Privacy podcast with Punit Bhatia. This is the podcast for those who care about their privacy. Here, your host, Punit Bhatia, has conversations with industry leaders about their perspectives, ideas, and opinions relating to privacy, data protection, and related matters. Be aware that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not legal advice. Let us get started.
So here we are with Tom Kemp. Welcome, Tom, to Fit for Privacy podcast.
Oh, so glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And I read about your profile, and that's how we connected as well. You have an opinion about privacy, but let me start with a very basic question. The GDPR, which is usually the baseline when it comes to privacy conversations, how would you put it in one word?
I don't know if this is one word, but sets the gold standard.
Good, it's good, gold standard indeed. It's self explanatory. And now, most of us, when it comes to privacy, especially the skeptics who get more attention in the media, they say the big tech has all the data, we will never be able to retrieve it, this and that and that and that. So, there's a whole philosophy of big tech has all the data, now it's too late. And then there are advocates of privacy who say, well, big tech may have your data, but there's an opportunity to contain the big tech because we need to protect our civil rights, economy, and democracy. And when I was reading your profile, I found that's the title of your book. How do you contain big tech? So tell me something about what are you wanting to say? What are your views about containing this big tech?
Well, yeah. So I've historically been a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in privacy and in cybersecurity. And then after my company got acquired, I've been involved in public policy, helping with California law, the CPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act, and I'm also currently the co-author of a bill that's working its way through the California legislature. That's the California Delete Act, and I think we'll probably talk about that later. But
Mhm.
all that came together for me to say, I need to write a book about the threats and issues involving big tech. Now, there have been books in the past, but there's been a lot of things that have been happening. We've in the United States, we've had the overturn of Roe v. Wade, the rise of TikTok, artificial intelligence, et cetera. And so, what I wanted to do is write a book to identify the problems with big tech, connect the dots, and provide straightforward solutions to the problems. Look,
Mhm.
in the past, we've had monopolies in the world, in the United States, in the US, we had railroads, we had Standard Oil. But a lot of, to your point, a lot of big tech's business model is not about producing things like railroads or pumping oil or making cars, but it's about mining our personal data. And we've always known about this. I mean, that's been, Google and Facebook, now Meta's business model from the beginning. And the trade-off that we had was, okay, we will give our personal data and we will deal with these annoying ads that are, somewhat targeted to us, et cetera. But what's happened over the last few years, and it came to the forefront with Cambridge Analytica, and then other things that have happened in terms of data breaches, but uses of the data. The data is increasingly being weaponized against us, and so in the U.S., now that we're in a post-abortion rights America, that healthcare data can be used against people, or the data combined with AI can be used to influence us, addict us, lead us into rabbit holes, etc. So Standard Oil was powerful, but it didn't know everything about us. So I think there does need to be a fresh look at big tech. I think there needs to be a fresh look at GDPR now that's 5 years out, and I think we need to think about the ways that data being captured not only by big tech but other businesses can and is being weaponized against us. And the other thing is, and I'll wrap up with this answer, is the problem that we have is that privacy is too hard for consumers. Like, it's a whack-a-mole, it's cookie fatigue, etc. And I think the thing is that as citizens and as regulators and as people like yourself that are industry experts, we got to think about ways to make it easier for people to be able to exercise their rights, et cetera, as opposed to basically being, dealing with, dark patterns all the time when it comes to our privacy.
Indeed. I think that's very well said. But the question becomes, how do you contain big tech? Because that responsibility is with multiple stakeholders. The government can put the laws, and that's where different regulations are coming up, which is a step in the right direction. Then it's also about individuals who are sharing their data to be more cautious, to be more careful, to be more wise in choosing what they share, where they share, and maybe also create some profiles. Because earlier it was always saying Tom at whatever.com or Punit at whatever.com. That was the standard operating model. But now in the modern digital world, you need to be cautious of maybe having Tom 1, Tom 2, and Tom 3, and choosing which one is the real Tom and which one is for subscription and so on. So when you say containing big tech, is that all? Because there's another dimension, in my view, the third dimension, that is the organizational responsibility, ethics, which is the gray area. Of course, privacy is hard, but that ethics is also hard. So we are getting into the shades of gray. And then technology keeps changing, and laws, as you said, GDPR also needs a revisit, also need to follow. So how, in your view, when you say containing big tech, all these three dimensions, if you agree with these three, or maybe you have a fourth and a fifth one, so how do you see that happening?
Well, I think the first thing is we need to educate and evangelize consumers about the threats and the things that they can do
Mhm.
today. So there are steps that can be done. And the funny thing is that when it's presented in a simple way, the overwhelming majority of people will pick the privacy path. For example, uh, Apple introduced a feature called App Tracking Transparency (ATT), and that to block third-party trackers. 96%. I see the most recent statistics say 96% of people turn that on, right? And there's other things that can be done. There are applications, for example, on the Android device, the DuckDuckGo browser. Even if you don't want to surf the web using that, on Android, it actually can provide comparable capabilities to ATT and block third-party trackers. And then you could put in your browser like Privacy Badger from EFF to block third-party trackers, et cetera. So the first thing is that there are things that just by through just simple education we can make people more privacy and security conscious. And so I think that needs to happen, and that goes a long way, right? And then people, and if they're more privacy and security conscious, then they're going to start pushing back. Instead of it just being Max Schrems doing it, there should be thousands and hundreds of thousands of more people saying, no, this is not acceptable. The second thing is that yes, government needs to do more, and they need to make it easier. in terms of the actual policies. Think about the people aspect of like, is this acceptable for me to have to constantly, accept cookies, et cetera? Or in the case of California, we've got this great law, the California Consumer Privacy Act, but the onus is still very much on us having to communicate directly with businesses and saying, do not sell my information, do not collect it, et cetera. I think a great solution is the global privacy control, which that we can that should be mandated, that has a signal from our browser that says, when I visit a website, don't sell my information, don't collect the sensitive information, et cetera. And then lastly, and I think this is going to come to the forefront with AI, is I think industry needs to come together and provide certification and standards, et cetera. We have this in the financial area. We have certified, you know, CPAs. We have certified people, right, that can do audits, et cetera. We need this similar for example, AI or even privacy, et cetera. We need specific standards, and so that raises the bar. And so we need certified people that can do, for example, AI risk management, and we need industry to come together with a set of risk management standards as it relates to AI and privacy, et cetera. So it's not just about, we need to pass better laws. I mean, that's very helpful, but we also need to educate people about the threats. And that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, Containing Big Tech. But I think also industry needs to kind of step it up, and have organizations like IAPP is great, and there needs to be more certification standards, et cetera, coming from private organizations or ISO, et cetera, to provide kind of a consistent playing field, for this type of technology.
Sure, I fully agree with you. I think we all need to contribute, and it's not one size fits all. Everyone does their bit. But you mentioned something called global privacy control. It's often used and often misused also. So you explained global privacy control as kind of an indication from your PC saying, I don't want to be tracked. So you don't have to go to each website, each browser, each action you take from your IP, let's put it like that, which indicates that this IP does not need to be tracked. So does it mean it will solve the cookie problem? Because right now, every website I go asks me, and I sometimes wonder, especially as a privacy professional, why does every website need to ask? Didn't I say one time? Can they not remember?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, there's a couple of issues here. So the first issue is that the laws don't necessarily mandate support for that, and in California, that was baked into the regulations that people do have to support it, and there's been a lot of pushback. And enforcement in California will happen in July. So this is being battled right now. But the ideal end state is that people will, not only from their PCs and browsers, be able to do this, but you also need the same signal coming from your mobile device as well, right?
Okay.
So you need to be able to basically make it brain dead easy for a consumer to simply say, click this button on your browser, click this button on your phone, and it generally, anytime I use a mobile app or visit a website, etc., that I'm sending the message, and you need to accept it, and I don't have to go through the whole cookie thing. Or in the case of California, it says do not sell my data, and I have to go there and click it as well. That's just too much work. It's making
Yeah.
privacy hard, right? For people to have to constantly do that. And again, I call it kind of a whack-a-mole, right? As you go along, you're like whacking, like that game where you're whacking the little stuffed animals that pop out. But the interesting thing is that GPC is brilliant. And it needs to be enforced through regulations, et cetera, that websites do have to support it. But that only actually involves first party data. First party data is data collected with entities that we have a direct relationship. We have a big problem, especially in the United States, with entities called data brokers. Data brokers are entities that we don't have a direct business relationship with. We never visit their websites, but they still collect all this information, not only from mobile apps and via cookies, but our loyalty card information, our credit card purchases, etc. And they build a dossier, a profile on us, and that data in the United States is increasingly being weaponized. And that's why, as I alluded to before, I proposed and co authored a law called the California Delete Act that would give consumers the ability to go to a portal that would be operated by the California Consumer Privacy Agency. Um, and the consumers could simply put their email or their mailing address and register and say, boom, data brokers that are registered with the state, please delete all my information and no longer track me. So you need to deal with both first party data through a signal like GPC, and it needs to be extended to mobile, and it needs to have enforcement. But the secondary thing is for entities that we have an indirect relationship, we need the equivalent of what we have in the US is a do not call registry where you can go and register, and then the entities that buy and sell our data behind the scenes without our knowledge have to adhere to the deletion request and then do not track me moving forward request as well. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch to really make it simple, make it easy for consumers, because the fundamental problem we have is privacy is too hard, not only in the US but also in Europe as well.
I agree with you. Privacy is too hard, and we also make life complex of organizations as well by making laws. Because if I see the California space, which is one of the say most active spaces after Brussels, what I'm observing is there's the CCPA, there's the CPRA, there's this Data Privacy Act or Data Deletion Act, as we call it, or Data Delete Act. So
Yes.
what's going on? What are the trends? What is it, the end objective that California is trying to achieve? Because for an outsider, it seems a little bit overwhelming with all these things. People did CCPA, they thought they're done with. Then they did the CPRA, and they thought that's it. Now we are having the Delete Act. So what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, well, you're right that California in the United States has historically led the nation in consumer protection. We were really the first ones to focus on automobile emissions, and uh, and then also in 1970 we actually, or 1972, we added to our Constitution the right to privacy. That the right to privacy is actually not in the U.S. Constitution, right? So California has always been a leader, and it's known as the California effect. Obviously, a lot of the regulation as it relates to tech is coming from Brussels, and so you have that Brussels effect as well. So both you and I are kind of, you're in Brussels, I'm here in Silicon Valley, and we're kind of in the geographies that are kind of leading the industry. So this is great that you and I are talking and exchanging notes here in this great podcast of yours. And so specific to California, California had the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, and that passed in 2018. And the interesting thing about it was that the person behind it, a real estate millionaire called Alistair McTaggart, and I've become really good friends with Alistair. He's an amazing person, and he was going to put this on the ballot in California because you could have direct democracy. They're called propositions, and uh, what happened is the industry was going to go against this, and then Cambridge Analytica happened, and they dropped their opposition, and the legislature said, you know, we're going to look really stupid that this basic privacy thing is going to be on the ballot. So they took it over and they passed it in law in 30 days. You've never seen legislators kind of hustle as much. But what happened is after it passed in 2018, Alistair saw that the industry was going in and starting to water it down. It immediately, there's all these bills. Well, we cut out this, do this. And so what he decided to do is upgrade the CCPA with the California Privacy Rights Act, or CPRA, as he knew that this upgrade would not get through the legislature. So he actually did a ballot measure, which became Prop 24 in the 2020 campaign. And then that's where I met and hooked up with Alistair, and I became a full-time volunteer on the campaign and worked on it for 6 months. And the thinking behind the CPRA was the following. First, make it a floor versus make it a floor versus a ceiling, meaning that the privacy law cannot be watered down by the legislature. The second thing is we need to have more teeth in the actual enforcement of the law. And so that is why through Prop 24, we now have the California Privacy Protection Agency. It's the first, you guys have uh, DPA, and you have, for example, the DPC in Ireland, et cetera. We don't have anything like that. And so this is the first dedicated privacy agency. And with a budget of 10 million, it will actually allow us to have more people doing privacy than the Federal Trade Commission in that does for the entire country as well. So it's a big deal. And then the final thing, because my answer to your question about GDPR was that it's the gold standard. This actually made California privacy law it upgraded it and tried to make it even more on par with GDPR. For example, added purpose limitation, storage limitation, data minimization. It added the right of correction. And there's been some other capabilities. And so the good news is the regulations have been written and enforcement will begin in July of this year. So that is the first big trend, which is that finally we have a comprehensive privacy law that will have teeth, that will be on par with GDPR, that can't be watered down, and there's a dedicated privacy agency. So that's the big thing that's happening in California. And if you want, I can talk about there's two other things that are going on. One is the age
Sure.
appropriate design code. And then the other thing is the California Delete Act. The age appropriate design code did pass and will be enforced in 2024. It's actually being challenged in court. And then the other thing is for data brokers is my California Delete Act, which is now being considered by the legislature.
That's nice. And now California is also the place where the Silicon Valley is.
Yes.
So on one hand, we are talking about containing big tech. On the other hand, we are talking about promoting innovation. And that's interesting because that's how it should be. We need to keep the balance in the right way. But how is the Silicon Valley viewing privacy? Is it seeing it as an overhead? Is it seeing it as a necessity? Is it seeing it as something ethical? Is it seeing as business value for consumers? How does it see it?
Well, I think just like any diverse community, and depending on if you're an incumbent or if you're a challenger, et cetera, you see things differently, right? So there isn't a monolithic view from Silicon Valley here of privacy. So I think you can kind of say there's a big tech view and then there's the startup view. And big tech, as we all know, has created these incredible walled gardens. And by the way, there's a lot of great features, capabilities, a lot of good that's happened with the big tech companies. The issue, of course, is that I don't think they've fully thought through how data collection can be weaponized. I also think that they've become monopolies and they're stifling innovation. For example, charging 30% if you sell something through an app store is not startup friendly, right? When even after you get it past a million and a half, the rates go up to 30%, and it provides an unfair playing field because they're providing the marketplace, but they also have products in the marketplace as well. And you have to pay the Apple or Android tax, or in the case of Amazon, they actually prefer their own products that they gather data of what's selling through the marketplace, and then they can offer cheap knockoffs, et cetera. So there's some fundamental monopoly issues involved here. But with their walled gardens, what they do is they continuously collect our data. They serve you ads, and they want to keep you in the garden. And they're increasingly trying to use AI to make their products more addictive. And probably the apex predator of that is TikTok, right? That it's all algorithms keeping you hooked. And if you guys have children that are using TikTok, you are probably just amazed that they spend a couple hours a day on it. But going back to the monopoly issue, the big tech platforms lack interoperability. So say I want to get off of Facebook, maybe there's a new social app I want to use that, but my friends are still on the Facebook app from Meta. So me on this new app, I can't communicate with them. And so I'm kind of stuck using Facebook. So what this all boils down to is that there's actually less motivation for Facebook and Google to actually innovate in areas like privacy, because they just want to keep on collecting the information. They want to keep on using AI on that data, and we're kind of stuck. They're almost like too big to care, right? And so
Yeah.
finally, it's gotten so bad that in the main markets that big tech competes in, that VCs don't want to fund any challengers. So they're not being pushed by competitors to do more, especially in privacy. And they push back against any new regulations, any new proposals for laws to minimize their ability. So that's kind of their view, which is basically they don't want to be regulated. Trust us. But the issue that we have is it's, with those guys, like Meta has Cambridge Analytica, they apologize, but then in 2019 they have 5 breaches of hundreds of millions of users. They apologize, they move on, then they make available on Instagram, that kids can be contacted by adults, et cetera. They apologize, they pay a small fine, they move on. So they don't want to be regulated, but this is just not working. The startup view in Silicon Valley is that privacy can be used as a differentiating feature, and that you can actually make money at privacy. And so there's a bunch of startups in privacy tech that are aimed both at consumers and at the enterprise, that they can feel that they can actually help businesses address the regulations. And there's that AI can be governed, and there can be risk management, et cetera. And in fact, I'm actually investing in some of these companies. I'm kind of putting my money in as an angel investor, my money where my mouth is. And so I think people, the startup community, VCs, actually potentially see that there's the ability to build some innovative stuff in the areas of privacy.
That's wonderful because I'm glad you share your view on the Silicon Valley, but that's another aspect which you touched, and I want to go there. That's the privacy investments. So, what is happening with privacy investments, especially in Silicon Valley context? Because are we investing in privacy enough, or are there things? Because when I'm talking to Silicon Valley companies, there is a different view, and I like to have your view on what's happening, especially from funding side. Because if funding is coming, then we can have more innovation on privacy, more ideas on privacy being implemented, more security being there.
Well, yeah, I think um, I actually am probably the most prolific angel investor in privacy companies. I have investments over six privacy centric companies. And by the way, I'm not a venture capitalist. I just put my own money in to companies at a very early stage. So as people are trying to bootstrap the company, they get money from their Uncle Larry, but then I hear about them, and I work with the CEO, and I write a check from my own bank account to kind of help them as well, because I just believe in this. And I think from my perspective, and I think the real VCs, as opposed to me being an angel or seed investor, are starting to see this, is that there are laws coming out that can actually drive the need to make privacy more of a must have versus a nice to have. So, one of the things about, especially with enterprise technology, is that companies will only buy a software product or cloud solution if they have to, right? They're not in the business of doing nice to have things. It's, time and money is precious, etc. They're not going to waste their times with things that they can't prove that they really need, etc. And historically in cybersecurity, it's taken I'm going to call them sticks, like PCI DSS or Graham-Leach Bliley or HIPAA, or to motivate people to say, yes, I know security is an issue, but I'm not required to actually do this. But now when you have PCI or Graham-Leach Bliley or HIPAA or whatever, you actually are like, oh, I could actually get fined, or I cannot get accredited or something like that. And so that motivates them. And that's what really kind of jump started the cybersecurity market. I think in privacy, yes, you had GDPR. So you had the first version one of software vendors coming out with solutions that help people do a better job with GDPR. CCPA, CPR are helping. And now in the United States, last year we had 5 privacy laws. Now we have 10. So I think that the stick is getting bigger to motivate people to do stuff. But I think there's a new wave, especially coming from Europe, of regulations that should drive more startups. So, for example, I mean, obviously you have the DSA, DMA, they tend to focus on the bigger entities. But I think like the AI Act, once that gets through in Europe, it is going to force and require organizations to do more auditing and risk governance and risk management associated with it. And so, actually, in London, I there's a company called Holistic AI that I invested in because I was like, wow, this is a platform for people wanting to harness AI ethically and safely. And it provides AI risk management and auditing. And so I felt that with the AI Act coming on board, that holistic AI could ride that wave as well. So if you can attach yourself to like your data act, for example. I have an investment in a company in France called Astron, that allows people to separate and split out their sensitive data via regions, and it provides encryption, fragmentation, etc. So there's just a lot of good opportunities that you can map actually to rules and regulations, your data act, your AI act, etc., that should foster an ecosystem of not only service providers and experts like yourself, but also a set of technology providers as well. And so I think the key thing with privacy investing is that people are starting to realize that these laws and rules will then foster innovation to help people address these things.
I think that's a very good way of summarizing that we need an ecosystem of various laws. And it's not just privacy in isolation, the ethics, the AI, the security, the data governance, all need to be looked at it together. And in fact, that was also the view I got a few weeks ago when I was with the EDPS director. And he was also talking about AI and privacy will become both the roles of the DPO going forward. And that's the direction we are headed, because we started with vanilla privacy, then we added big tech or the technology part, and people were asking, do I need to know about technology or privacy? Am I a security expert? And now we are adding AI. But end of the day, we are talking about protecting data or making data private or making ensuring privacy, and that's where the focus will be. But I believe there your book would also be a great asset. And when is it coming, by the way?
Yeah, no, it's so containing big tech.
Yeah.
You can actually just type containingbigtech.com. It actually redirects to the Amazon page, and it's available for order right now. Well, actually, pre-order right now. It's available in mid-August, but you can order it right now, and when it's on the in the database, or it's in the database and the inventory systems and all that stuff, it'll ship out in mid-August. And you can also learn more about the book at my personal website, tomkemp.ai, where I have I blog a lot, and so actually I have a lot of nice comparisons of GDPR versus CCPA versus CPRA, etc. So it's a great resource site for people wanting to know more about California law and how it differs from European law, etc. I cover that a lot in the book as well. Talking about what's happening in Europe, what's happening in California, what's happening at the federal level, as well. So yeah, so containingbigtech.com takes you directly to the book, or you can go to my personal website, tomkemp.ai, where you can learn more about the book and the stuff that I write about.
Absolutely. What we will do is we will add the notes or the links to both the websites and also the Amazon link so that people can access it easily. But for now, I would say it was a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your time. Of course, going seeing your knowledge and wisdom, I think we can talk for days. But for this
well,
episode, let's say thank you so much.
well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being on.
Thanks for listening. If you liked the show, feel free to share it with a friend and write a review. If you have already done so, thank you so much. And if you did not like the show, don't bother and forget about it. Take care and stay safe. Fit4Privacy helps you to create a culture of privacy and manage risks by creating, defining, and implementing a privacy strategy that includes delivering scenario-based training for your staff. We also help those who are looking to get certified in CIPPE, CIPM, and CIPT through on-demand courses that help you prepare and practice for certification exam. Want to know more? Visit www.fit4privacy.com. That's www.FIT4Privacy.com. If you have questions or suggestions, drop an email at hello@fit4privacy.com. Until next time, goodbye.